A few days ago, a single cryptic post appeared on LLOUD's social accounts. No explanation, no product shots, just a phrase, a countdown, and a wave of speculation across fan communities within minutes. By the next day, it was a full countdown, D1, and by the day after that, it had a name, LLOUD Beach Club. Within hours of the reveal, clips and photos were already circulating across fan pages worldwide. For a company built around Lisa's music career, a beach-themed drop felt like a genuine left turn, and fans immediately started asking what it actually was and what it meant. Merch line? Something bigger? Early guesses ranged wildly, and none of them turned out to be quite right. So what exactly is LLOUD Beach Club, and why does a summer collection from a K-pop star's own company matter this much? Let's get into it. This video breaks down what LLOUD Beach Club actually is, why Lisa built it through her own company rather than a typical merch drop, and what it signals about her ambitions beyond music, using only what's actually been confirmed. Part 1. What is LLOUD? The foundation. To understand LLOUD Beach Club, you first need to understand LLOUD itself. Lisa founded LLOUD in February 2024 as her own artist management company, a venture she introduced to fans as a platform built to showcase her vision across music and entertainment. It wasn't a side project attached to an existing label, it was a company she owns, giving her a level of creative and business control that's relatively rare for an artist at her level of global fame. Just 2 months later, LLOUD partnered with RCA Records to release her solo music, under a deal reportedly giving her full ownership of her own recordings, a structure that put creative and financial control much more directly in her hands than a typical major label arrangement. Since then, LLOUD has been the home base for her solo era, her debut studio album, several charting singles, and a steadily growing presence that extends well beyond music into fashion collaborations and brand partnerships. Along the way, LLOUD has already put its name behind projects outside straightforward music releases, collaborations spanning fashion houses and lifestyle brands, each one adding another layer to what the company represents publicly. That track record is worth keeping in mind, because it means LLOUD Beach Club isn't the first time the company has stepped outside a purely musical lane. That last part matters more than it might seem. LLOUD's own public materials describe its mission using language like transcending genres and connecting generations. And the company has already put that philosophy into practice by attaching Lisa's name to projects in fashion and lifestyle spaces, not just music releases. In other words, LLOUD Beach Club isn't LLOUD suddenly stepping outside its lane. It's a continuation of a pattern the company had already been building toward. Part 2. The teaser campaign, building anticipation. The rollout itself followed a tried-and-true playbook, and it worked. It reportedly started with a single vague teaser posted to LLOUD's social accounts, enough to signal that something new was coming, without revealing what. Fans across social media immediately began speculating, with some guessing at new music, others wondering about a fashion collaboration, and plenty simply trying to piece together clues from the visual style of the teaser itself. Fan theories reportedly ranged from a new single to an entirely new sub-brand, with online discussions spreading well beyond dedicated fan accounts within hours. The anticipation built further with a countdown post, reportedly marked D1, confirming a reveal was imminent without giving away specifics. That kind of slow-burn rollout, vague tease, countdown, reveal, is a well-worn strategy precisely because it works. It gives a fan base time to organize, speculate, and effectively market the release themselves through sheer collective anticipation, before the brand has spent $1 on traditional advertising. It's worth pausing on why this approach is smart, rather than manipulative. Nothing about a countdown post misleads anyone. It simply creates space for curiosity to build naturally, letting the eventual reveal land with far more impact than if the collection had simply appeared on a shop page with no lead-up at all. For a fanbase already accustomed to treating every post as a potential clue, that kind of ambiguity isn't frustrating so much as genuinely fun to participate in. By the time LLOUD Beach Club actually dropped, the appetite for it had already been built almost entirely by the fans themselves, which is, from a brand-building perspective, exactly the point. Part 5. The reveal what LLOUD Beach Club actually is. So what did fans actually get? LLOUD Beach Club is a merchandise collection built around a vibrant, beach club-inspired aesthetic, officially described by LLOUD as the latest addition to what the company has been calling the LLOUD era. It launched online on July 5th, giving fans around the world a coordinated global drop, rather than a staggered, region-by-region release. Rather than treating this as a one-off novelty item, LLOUD positioned it as a genuine seasonal collection, the kind of coordinated, themed drop that suggests real creative direction behind it, rather than a handful of items slapped together with a logo. The visual language leans into warm weather, resort-inspired imagery, distinct from the darker, more high-fashion aesthetic often associated with her Louis Vuitton and other luxury partnerships. That contrast itself seems deliberate, a lighter, more playful register that broadens the range of contexts in which her personal aesthetic can show up. It's worth being precise about scope here. Publicly, LLOUD Beach Club has been described specifically as a merchandise collection, not as an entirely new standalone company or product category. That said, plenty of fans and online commentators have interpreted the polish, the coordinated rollout, and the standalone branding as evidence that Lisa and LLOUD are thinking well beyond typical tour merchandise, treating the LLOUD name itself as a lifestyle brand in the making, not just a music label with a logo store attached. Whether that interpretation holds up long-term is something only future LLOUD projects will confirm, but it's clearly the read a significant part of the fan base has taken from this specific drop. What's confirmed, at minimum, is this: a fully branded standalone feeling collection, launched with its own name, its own visual identity, and its own dedicated rollout, treated with a level of creative investment that goes noticeably beyond a simple tour t-shirt restock. That distinction, even without knowing every specific item in the line, tells you plenty about how seriously LLOUD approached this particular project. Part 6. Why Beach Club, the creative concept. The choice of Beach Club as a concept is worth sitting with for a moment because it's doing more branding work than it might first appear. A beach club, as an idea, carries specific associations, leisure, warm weather exclusivity, and a curated sense of community built around a shared aesthetic rather than a shared location. It's aspirational without being unreachable, the kind of concept that photographs beautifully, translates instantly across languages and cultures, and doesn't require any context about Kpop or Lisa's music career to understand. That universality matters for a global brand. Where a tour merchandise drop is explicitly tied to a specific album cycle or concert, a beach club concept functions more like an evergreen lifestyle. Identity. Something that can exist and expand independently of any single music release, built around a mood and an aesthetic rather than a specific project. It's a smart choice precisely because it gives LLOUD room to keep building on the idea in future seasons, rather than needing a new concept every time. There's also a community dimension worth naming. The word club itself implies belonging, membership in something, not just ownership of a product. For a fan base already deeply organized around shared identity and collective participation, that framing taps into something the community was already primed for, giving the collection a social dimension that a plain seasonal apparel line wouldn't carry on its own. Wearing a piece from the collection becomes less about owning a product and more about signaling membership in a shared moment, which is exactly the kind of emotional hook that turns a seasonal drop into something people actively want to be part of, rather than simply purchase. Part 7. From merch to lifestyle brand. The bigger strategy. Zoom out, and LLOUD Beach Club fits into a much broader shift in how major artists think about merchandise entirely. For years, artist merchandise mostly meant tour t-shirts, items tied directly to a specific album cycle or concert run, sold primarily as souvenirs rather than as standalone products with their own identity. Increasingly, though, top-tier artists have been treating merchandise as a genuine brand-building opportunity, coordinated collections, seasonal drops, and standalone aesthetics that exist independently of any single release, designed to be worn and recognized on their own terms. That shift mirrors a broader pattern across music, fashion, and entertainment more generally, where the most successful artist-led brands tend to be the ones treated with genuine design intention rather than as an afterthought. The business logic behind this shift is fairly straightforward. Owning a lifestyle brand, rather than simply licensing a name to seasonal tour merchandise, gives an artist a recurring revenue stream that doesn't depend on touring or new music releases to stay active. It also extends an artist's cultural presence into everyday life. Clothing people wear well outside of a concert setting, which reinforces brand visibility in a way a single tour cycle can't. Across the wider music industry, artists who've successfully made this pivot tend to share one thing in common. They treat merchandise design with the same creative seriousness as any other part of their public output, rather than as an afterthought licensed out to a third party. Given that Lisa already owns LLOUD outright, rather than operating merchandise through a separate licensing arrangement, she's structurally well-positioned to pursue exactly this kind of long-term brand building, should that be the direction LLOUD continues to take. Whether LLOUD Beach Club becomes an ongoing seasonal fixture or stays a one-time drop remains to be seen. But the underlying business logic for treating it as more than merch is genuinely sound, regardless of where this specific collection ultimately lands. Part 8. How fans are reacting. Online reaction to the reveal has, by most accounts, been enthusiastic. Fans across social media platforms expressed excitement about the collection's aesthetic direction, with many specifically praising how different it felt from typical artist merchandise. The general sentiment across fan spaces in the hours following the drop leaned strongly celebratory, with clips and photos from the collection circulating widely well beyond core fan accounts. A significant portion of the online conversation has centered specifically on the idea that this drop feels like more than merch. Some fans have pointed to the polish of the rollout, the standalone branding, and the coordinated global launch as evidence that Lisa and LLOUD are building something with real staying power, rather than a one-off summer novelty. There's also been a noticeable thread of pride in the reaction, with fans framing the launch as further proof of Lisa's growing business acumen, a narrative that's been building since LLOUD's founding, and one this launch appears to have reinforced rather than introduced. Some fans have gone further still, describing the launch as a genuine turning point in how they view LLOUD's long-term trajectory, though that's naturally a more speculative read than the enthusiasm about the collection itself. As with most fan reaction to any release, some of the online conversation should be read as excitement in the moment, rather than confirmed insight into LLOUD's actual long-term plans. But the overall sentiment has been clearly positive. Part 9. What this says about Lisa as an entrepreneur. Step back, and LLOUD Beach Club is best understood as one more data point in a pattern that's been building since Lisa first founded her own company. Choosing to own her masters and manage her own solo career, rather than operate entirely within a traditional label structure, already signaled an artist thinking about long-term ownership rather than short-term output. Since then, LLOUD's steady expansion into fashion partnerships and now a standalone lifestyle-style merchandise concept continues that same thread. An artist treating her own name and aesthetic as an asset to be deliberately built, not just monetized through touring and streaming. This also connects naturally to her already well-established reputation in fashion, where she spent years building credibility as a genuine aesthetic authority, rather than simply a celebrity face attached to campaigns. Extending that authority into a brand she actually owns, rather than one she's merely the ambassador for, represents a meaningful next step, the difference between being the face of someone else's vision and being the architect of her own. It's a distinction that matters more than it might initially seem. Plenty of major artists have their name licensed onto merchandise lines they have little creative involvement in. LLOUD Beach Club, by contrast, exists specifically because Lisa built the company that decided to make it, a structurally different kind of ownership that tends to produce more coherent, more intentional creative output over time. It's the difference between renting out a name and actually running the business behind it. Part 10. What might come next? So where might LLOUD go from here? To be clear, none of what follows is confirmed. This is informed speculation based on the pattern LLOUD has followed so far, nothing more. Given that this collection launched as a distinct seasonally themed concept rather than tour merchandise, it's reasonable to wonder whether future seasonal drops might follow a similar model. New themes, new aesthetics, potentially building LLOUD's lifestyle identity out further over time. Given LLOUD's existing pattern of fashion collaborations, it's also plausible that future projects could involve outside creative partners, though nothing along those lines has been announced for Beach Club specifically. It's also worth watching whether LLOUD extends this same standalone brand treatment to other categories beyond apparel. Accessories, home goods, or collaborative capsules are all plausible directions other artist-led lifestyle brands have taken, though again, none of that is confirmed for LLOUD specifically at this point. What does seem reasonably safe to say is that LLOUD, as a company, has shown a clear willingness to expand beyond pure music output. And this drop is unlikely to be the last time it does. At its core, LLOUD Beach Club is a summer merchandise collection. But the story underneath it is really about ownership. A company Lisa built herself, expanding in a direction she chose, on a timeline she controlled, without needing anyone else's approval to try something new. Whether or not this specific drop turns into a recurring seasonal tradition, it's a clear signal of where her ambitions sit right now, not just performing, but building, deliberately, on her own terms. That's a genuinely different story than most artist merchandise tells, and it's worth paying attention to precisely because of that. If you got your hands on something from the collection, or if you're just curious where LLOUD goes from here, let us know in the comments what you'd want to see next.